So on my first deployment to Kandahar in 2006, I was kind of thrown into an unforeseen situation, and I became the architect of an operation called Operation Medusa, where we removed about 1,500 fighters, Taliban fighters, off the battlefield.
A lofty claim by Canada's Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan has landed him in the middle of a mini-scandal. You heard him say it there in a speech earlier this month in New Delhi that he was the architect of Operation Medusa. That's the mission conducted by Canadian forces against the Afghan Taliban in 2006, where hundreds of Taliban fighters were captured or killed. Several Canadian soldiers died in that battle as well. But soldiers who were there in 2006 tell CBC News that Sajjan was at no time in on the planning of the operation. One anonymous source calling it a bald-faced lie, and they're not happy about it. Sajjan released a statement of regret on Friday, saying he wished he had chosen his words better, and another outright apology yesterday on Facebook. The opposition, as you just heard, stopping short of calling for his resignation, leaving that option open. It's time for the Sunday Scrum. What do they think? Joining me today, freelance columnist Susan Riley. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Carol.
John Ibbotson of the Globe and Mail. Good morning, John.
Hi, Carol.
And Katie O'Malley of iPolitics. Hi, Katie.
Good morning.
All three are in Ottawa this week. Susan, let me begin with you. Is this a firing offense or resigning offense?
I don't think so. I think that the minister clearly made a mistake. He overstated his role, I guess, in this mission. For whatever it, but what strikes me most about it is that it seems out of character. He doesn't come across as a bombastic self-promoter at all. As to this charge by Mr. Bazan that he's a chronic liar, again, that doesn't really match reality, at least in the way I've been following it. Yes, Mr. Sajjan has been artful, let's say. He's about some issues that have come up regarding the armed forces. Yeah. But, I would say within the normal realm of ministerial behavior, he doesn't strike me, he strikes me as somebody who's made a mistake and is probably going to provide the contrite and sincere apology on Monday that Mr. Bazan is looking for in the House of Commons. And I think after that, everybody will move on.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if he had used the word heavily involved rather than the architect, he would have been fine. Because, in fact, we know that the intelligence work that Minister Sajjan did in 2006, linking up with local tribal leaders, getting a vital intelligence that was used in the Operation Medusa, was highly important. He's guilty of doing something you usually only do in bars with your mates after a few drinks, which is exaggerating your military exploits. And for that, he needs to be held to account. But does he have the confidence of the Prime Minister? I think in the way he's been managing the deployment in Latvia, in the way he's managed the procurement issue with the fighter jets, in the way he's been advising on the wisdom or perhaps the folly of getting involved in the peacekeeping mission in Afghanistan, he's doing his job as Minister of Defense. And the question is, do you remove a minister that heavily involved in that many files midway through a mandate over something, again, that he should only have said in a bar?
Katie, what do you think? Is it a firing or resigning offense here?
I would, like James Bazan, as it turns out, put that on hold for now. I agree that he probably does need to give a statement in the House of Commons. I would expect that to be an actual, not just in response to questions in question period, but actually get up and sort of lay it out. To me, the fact that we're now hearing that he's made similar claims in the past on at least one occasion, to me, that actually almost gets him a bit off the hook in the sense that it sounds like in his mind he really believed he was at least an architect of this mission, that when he looked back he didn't think he was, stretching the truth or telling a tall tale when he made those statements, or at least it doesn't appear that he would have thought that because he said it before and there was apparently no kerfuffle. So in that sense, are we getting down to a question of semantics? Is it over heavily involved versus an architect versus the architect? That becomes a little more difficult, I think, for the opposition to pursue as an actual case of a minister misleading the public. That said, it's embarrassing, obviously. The fact that he's now had to be dealing with it for 4 or 5 days has got to be, not great news for either the minister or, frankly, the Prime Minister's office. There's one other thing that I think we do have to kind of at least take into consideration, and this is a couple of sort of military and constitutional experts have been floating this, and the notion of members of the military actively criticizing, even anonymously, the actions or the behavior of the Minister of Defense is a really slippery slope in the whole terms of sort of the executive versus the military and responsibility that is probably worth raising an eyebrow at as well. That's not really supposed to be on. You really shouldn't have people in uniform criticizing the actions of the minister. That's not their job, and that's not kind of what they're expected to do.
Okay,
so that's also a factor.
If I could just very quickly, as devil's advocate, that said, the tendency to exaggerate or invent military exploits is not unique, and it has consequences. Let's not forget Hillary Clinton claiming that she landed under fire in Bosnia in 1996 when the video showed that she was welcomed at the tarmac by a young girl who gave her flowers and read her a poem. That cost Hillary Clinton. And Brian Williams' career was, seriously and permanently damaged when he claimed that his helicopter came under rocket fire in Iraq, when in fact no such thing occurred. So there are consequences to inventing your military exploits.
Yeah, let me just let me just put this on the table again, as I did with James Bazan, and that is what General Fraser, Brigadier General David Fraser, had to say in the National Observer obtained copy of this letter from 2015. It is glowing to the point of Sajjan's role in Operation Medusa and others. Let's take a look at that. If we could run that board, thank you. He tirelessly and selflessly devoted himself to piecing together the ground truth on tribal and Taliban networks in the Kandahar area. And his analysis was so compelling, it drove a number of large-scale theater-resourced efforts, including Operation Medusa. Now, that in a large-scale conventional combat operation that resulted in the defeat of the largest Taliban insurgent cell yet identified in Afghanistan, with over 1,500 Taliban killed or captured. This speaks to, and Susan, I know you were about to say something, but this speaks to what you're all saying, is that he may have believed that he was an architect in his own mind, was the architect of Operation Medusa.
I was also going to mention that this commendation, which you cited before and which has come to light, casts Mr. Sajjan in a very favorable light. That thing you read goes on to say that the Canadian Forces has never had such an able and useful intelligence officer, that he is personable, courageous, and intelligent. I believe all those three words were used. So in some ways it enhances his reputation. And I think it underscores how, kind of trivial, I'm not going to say trivial, but how minor his mistake was.
Yeah, is it minor, though? I mean, what the opposition's point is that it wasn't the first time. I mean, and they cite the issue with Iraq and allies.
But if the operation was largely based on intelligence that he had gathered, and if his senior officers asked him for ideas or direction, okay, he wasn't an architect maybe in the way that most of us think of the word, but he was clearly implicated in the success of the mission.
Okay,
and that's a different thing from being Donald Trump. From pretending you won and you weren't even there.
Is that the bar now? If that's the bar, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I guess so.
Despite assurances to the contrary, the Iraqis did not quietly nor happily accept Canada's withdrawal of CF-18 fighters from combat against the Islamic State, new documents reveal. This is from April 4th, 2017, Murray Brewster's CBC News. This is the pattern that the opposition is suggesting is out there, that the Minister of Defense has a pattern of not being fully open and accused of lying in that case. Katie.
In that case, I think we're also veering into the realm of kind of two different interpretations of the events that transpired. Yeah, you definitely had the minister, when he was asked about this, sort of suggest that no, the Iraqis were absolutely fine with it, there was no hassle, and then information that came out later suggested that maybe it wasn't quite so smooth. Those are discussions, however, and negotiations that were taking place behind closed doors. None of us have yet all of the context, so that's a little bit more of a gray area as far as I can see it. That's one where I could imagine that Minister Sajjan might have actually genuinely again believed, and might be able to argue even today, that his take on it was in fact correct. Overall, there was not much grumbling. At the same time, the opposition can point to documents and say, aha, but there was some grumbling. So that to me is far more of a gray area and a more typical political dispute over issues than the question of was a minister right to claim personal involvement in a particular affair. So to me, that's a little bit different, and conflating the two, I think, might weaken the opposition case a little.
And also, Prime Minister Trudeau made the same argument when he was criticized for the withdrawal from Iraq. So, you know, was the minister echoing the Prime Minister? Was the Prime Minister taking his lead from the minister? As Katie said, this was more in the realm of politics. It's still, you know, open to criticism, but it's different from the issue of character, I think.
John, what do you make of the fact that the opposition is stopping short of calling for his resignation or firing?
Well, I think it's commendable on the part of the opposition, because opposition politicians tend to call for the resignation of ministers at the drop of a hat. And there's no question that there's controversy surrounding what Mr. Sajjan said and the role that he ascribed to himself. So I would actually say kudos to Mr. Bézin to say we're not going to push any harder on this until we've heard what he has to say in the House of Commons, and until we've heard what the Prime Minister has to say about his level of confidence in the minister. This is commendably responsible on the part of the opposition.
All right. We should also note that we've reached out to Minister Sajjan, but we're told that he is not doing any interviews this weekend. We'll see what he has to say this week.